So now that we learned about slots, we can of course use our base card slot also here in the badge list. There I also got a section which should have this card look. So we can remove this section styling here, not the H2 styling, I want to keep that exclusive to this component, but the section styling. And then use our base card component here to wrap this unordered list and the H2 tag in our case. So use base card as a wrapper around this content, and that will now ensure that again it looks like before, but now we have this reusable card component, and we can use it wherever we need that look. But that's not even all you can use slots for. It is nice that we're able to pass dynamic content between the opening and closing tags of our own component. But sometimes you also have the scenario that your custom component should have multiple slots. And actually I can show this here at the example of this base card. At the moment it has one slot, but it would not be unrealistic that it should have two slots. Let's say one slot for the header and one slot for the main content. So here in base card, we could add a header component to ensure that we always have the same structure for every card, for example. And then here we also want to add a slot, like this. But of course now we have two slots, and therefore Vue wouldn't really know where the provided content should go. So that's why, if you use more than one slot, you can add names to slots with the name attribute on the slot element. And here we could give this a name of header, but that name is up to you. Can be anything. Doesn't have to be the wrapping element's name. You don't have to name all slots. If you leave one unnamed slot, that will be the default slot. But you must only have one unnamed slot. And now you can assign the content to the different slots. For example, in user info, we could now go to our header here. And now here, I want to tell Vue that this content, the h3 tag and the base tag, should go to the header slot. And for that, you wrap it with a template tag, which is a default HTML element. And on that template tag, which holds the content that should go into your named slot, you add a special directive, the vSlot directive. The vSlot directive can be used to let Vue know where certain content should go to. Now you let Vue know where the content should go to by adding an argument to this directive, which you do by adding a colon and then the name of your slot. Now I have a named slot with a name of header here, and therefore we can add header as an argument here. And this tells Vue that the content inside of the template will go to this named slot. Now as a side note, the template is a default HTML tag which doesn't render anything to the screen though, which is why we use it as a container here. Now if you then have content left which is not in a template with vSlot, that content will automatically go to the default slot. So if I save that, it looks almost like before, but we can tell that something changed because now the label, the badge here, is no longer next to the name. And it is no longer next to the name because we no longer have the header here in user info. Instead, we have the template where we send this content into the header of base card. And since the header styling, which was responsible for placing the badge next to the title, is still in user info and is scoped to this component, it does not affect the header in base card. We're going to take care about styling in the next lecture though. Before we do that, however, let me go to badge list, and here I want to send this h2 tag into the header. So again, we need a template, wrap h2 with it, and then add vSlot header. You can also be more explicit about the fact that this here, the rest will go into the default slot by adding a template here, adding a template around that, and then adding vSlot default. Default is a reserved name, and like the name implies, it always targets the default slot. So I'm going to do this here and also in the user info component to be very clear about which content goes where and to make it obvious that I did not forget to assign this to any slot, but that I want this to go to the default slot. So that's why I add this default slot template to both user info and badge list here. But with that, that's what we got. Now let's explore the styling here and let's see how we can fix this when working with slots.